Okay.
Yeah, good. Hello there. Thanks for joining us. Today I got Kathleen Ball, who's got an amazing new book. She's part of our Stairway to the Stars conference expo in Las Vegas at the Luxor. She's going to be vending. She's going to be talking about her new book and getting into some really interesting subjects. Kathleen, thanks for joining us.
Very well. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I'm very excited about the event. I'm excited to be able to share some of this information, the research that I've been doing for many, many years. And this is my first book that I've written about the subject. And basically, you know, I'm talking about my discovery of a Knights Templar cave in Brazil. And my book is the backstory of that. It involves, you know, going all the way back into my childhood. What was my foundation as a human being? And you know, up into France and Italy and some of the places that I went, Scotland, Portugal, some of the places that I went to investigate and do research about the Templars and try to get an idea of why they went into Brazil, because this cave is literally in the middle of nowhere. You know, it's up above a little teeny town called Moinho, which has a dirt road into it still. And
Wow.
it's adjacent to another small town called Alto Paraiso, which is, you know, it's a pretty nice resort area now, you know. But anyway, so what's this cave doing in the middle of nowhere in this Templar cave with all this insignia, Templar crosses on the inside, a lot of symbolism, you know, that is also found in Peniche, Portugal, and Istanbul, which is
amazing.
Constantinople. What is this stuff doing here? You know, it's like, it was just blowing my mind. So I did a lot of research, of course, in the area and talked to a lot of locals and found out that, yes, indeed, the Templars did have they sort of came in and colonized this small area of Alto Paraiso, Cavalcanti, Moinho, and San George, which means St. George. So, you know, here we have St. George, symbolic of the Grail Quest, you know. If you drive a little ways outside of Alto Paraiso, you're going to find a castle called Camelot, right? That was built by a Templar descendant who I interviewed. He's also in my first film. So, you know, it is just fascinating to me how this is there. And then there's also 3 more caves in the area in Cavalcanti that I still have yet to investigate. I need to get in if I have to get permission from the Kalunga people. And I've already interfaced and done some interviews with the Kalunga people. And what the Kalunga people are the descendants of, well, the Spanish and Portuguese brought slave ships into Brazil. They escaped prior to becoming slaves, and they're very proud of that fact. So they escaped into Alto Paraiso. This was in the 1500s. And they hid out in these caves. So fast forward to, you know, the early 1900s and middle of the 1900s, the Brazilian government gave them these territories where they had hid out. And so these Templar caves are on their land.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
You know, I remember hearing some things about this, but not much. It just seems like you kind of tapped into something that is not fully researched yet.
Absolutely.
What, like, you know, is there? I don't know if there is. I don't know if it's readily available to screen share some of these hieroglyphs or symbology that's in some of these tunnels. But man, this is so interesting that this is. This is there, and like you're right, like what were they doing there? I mean, have you got an idea of so far?
On my 3rd trip, I found out, on my 2nd trip, I found out that my cave, the cave that I discovered, was a gold mine. So that's
when was this a gold mine?
This was utilized up until the early 1800s, from what I understand, because the woman who lives on the property just below the cave in what's called Moinho, I interviewed her as well. And her great-great-great-grandfather, who came in and basically homesteaded that property, was still mining it at that time. And this was in the 1800s. So I know that the cave was still an active gold mine at that time. And so I suspect that the other ones were probably gold mines as well at one time.
So you're feeling that they were there.
What it's starting to look like to me is that the Templars were coming in and mining this gold and taking it back into Portugal. So they were probably coming back and forth. Now, when I found out that King Dinis in the 1300s built a fortress for them in Peniche, it started making sense. I started seeing a picture of what's going on or what was going on at that time. And I know that all the kings in Europe at that point had just, their coffers were empty as a result of supporting, the Crusades in the Holy Land. They were all broke. This is why King Francis I went after the Templars in 1307, because he was broke. They had all, they'd spent all their money on these crusades and they had no money left. So, but in Portugal at that time, the Portuguese and the Portuguese king was not broke. He had money. So it was like, oh, well, that's interesting. So it looks to me like the Templars very possibly were going into South America and mining gold and silver and bringing it back to King Dinis at that time. And so, the Portuguese they were the shipbuilders. They were known as the shipbuilders. And so they had the men, they had the fleet, they had the availability, and apparently they had the maps. Apparently they knew where they were going. So originally they referred to Brazil as what was it? Something cross. Well, anyway, it referred to a cross, and it was an island. They told everyone that it was an island so that none of the other countries in Europe would be interested in it. And it turned out it's not an island. And, later we all found out that it was a huge continent, South America. But from what my research indicates at this point, that they were not only coming into Brazil, but they were also coming into Peru, and they were mining silver. So it looks to me like that's where King Dinis, replenished his coffers, was with the Templars bringing them back gold and silver, which would also explain, it would also be one of the primary reasons why King Dinis converted them to the Knights of Christ and continued to support them as an order.
Right, because, they would be going in now as like, servants of Christ's and spreading the good.
Well, it served two purposes. The Catholic Church was coming in on Portugal. It was the only remaining nation that they did not have control of at that point in time in history. And so by naming them the Knights of Christ and putting them basically under the charge of the Catholic Church at that point, that satisfied the church. But it also allowed the Templars to continue to conduct their business underground with a safe haven. So they didn't take, like in some of the other countries in Europe at that time in the early 1300s, they did not take the Templars' property. They maintained all of their farms, all of their everything. They maintained their castles and control of all their properties. Now, this wasn't the case in many of the other countries. All their properties were confiscated and turned over to the Hospitallers. So, so this was an oddity, and it never made sense to me. It's like, well, why was Portugal the only holdout? It just wasn't making sense to me. I know that it was a Templar nation. I've read all Freddie Silver's books, and we've also discussed this matter. And I understand that that was important to them to create this sovereign nation, protecting other cultures and other religious belief systems. And they brought the Cathars in, the Druids, et cetera, et cetera. But that couldn't have been the only reason for a king to stick out his neck and, basically push back against the Catholic Church at this time in history. Nobody did anything without the approval of the Catholic Church during the 1300s. Just wasn't happening.
Right. Yeah, they had such influence, and very interesting. So like, so there's so many mixed feelings and mixed ideas about the Templars, you know, and you know, they could be part of, you know, of one side, and they can be part of another side. Like, what's your thoughts on it?
Well, I think by the 1300s, you know, it was pretty obvious to everyone at that point in time that they had a tremendous amount of power. They had more money than anybody else. And so, you know, that's going to generate, it's not going to just attract the poor Knights of Christ of Solomon, like, you know, like it had been, that were dedicated to a cause, and they give up all their property and, you know, their money and their titles, et cetera, et cetera. Yes, this was still happening with the core of Templars, but I think that they had also attracted, you know, peripheral, on their edges, I would say non-altruistic followers. And, you know, I think because that happens with any organization. If you watch any organization, I don't care how great their cause is, eventually they're going to attract, you know, something else. And so I think that that was happening at that point in time. You know, it was obvious because we did have some of these people that gave evidence against the Templars to the church in France, right? So we did have some non-loyal members. There's evidence of that, and we see that with these, you know, these narratives that they talked about things that were going on, whether they were true or not, I don't know. But they turned against their own brotherhood. And so it tells me that, yes, there was some other things going on, right? Other interests. They may have been there for the property. They may have been there for the money. Who knows what they're there for?
Or, but, you know, there could be also that they were leaving treasure in different places on the planet foreseeing that one day, you know, we will need a sovereign planet. And, you know, the only way to take down the elites is to, you know, have this, to uncover some of these treasures. And, you know, who knows? That's just a fantasy. But you know what? It could be a fantasy come true. So amazing things that we're going to be talking about at Stairway to the Stars. Kathleen Ball's with us, her new book, A Grail Quest, right?
Yes.
And what a great title. Everyone, a very, very sexy title. I feel people are going to gravitate towards it, as they already are. So Stairway to the Stars, November 10, 11, and 12 at the Luxor in Las Vegas. This event is going to sell out. Please get your tickets, book your travel. There's contracted hotel rates on the website. Come meet Kathleen and the rest of our amazing speakers. Check us out at disclosurefest.org for all the information, tickets, and travel. And thanks for joining us on this little live with Kathleen. Kathleen, thank you. And we'll see you at the Luxor and see you on the stars.
Sounds great. All right, Adrian, you have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thanks, love. Bye.